back, my crafty friends. Today's tutorial is a good one. I'm very, very excited about it. If you've seen any of our other tutorials, you may have already seen the Pocket Pal. Had the 3 recessed card slots, the snap closure, and a zippered pocket. So due to popular demand, we have made it a little bit bigger and more of a full functioning wallet. Introducing the Purse Pal. You have 6 card slots here, the same snap closure, slip pocket to put your cash or receipts or anything else that you want to put in there, and then a larger lined zipper compartment. In today's video, I am making this black wallet in leather, but it can also be made in cork and even in vinyl. And at the end of the video, I'm going to show you how to finish these edges with some leather edge paint. A lot of people didn't even realize that you can paint cork or vinyl, and you can. So this project comes together in less than an hour, and you can leave them raw if you'd like, or you can walk away super confident because you're learning how to edge paint. And stick around, I'm going to show you how to do that right now. The question I get asked a lot is, can this wallet be made in a cotton material? And unfortunately, it can't, because the edges are left raw, as I've already mentioned, including those card slots. So if you're using a fabric, it will fray over time. It's not going to have the stability that it needs. It really needs to be in a self-healing textile such as leather, cork, vinyl. I've even had a tester use Craftex, so that's certainly an option. So keep that in mind when you are picking your materials for this project. So I have printed out my pattern pieces, and I've gone ahead and just left them clipped since I've cut them out, because we're going to use our pattern pieces as templates to cutting our card slots and the zipper box and the zipper back on the liner. So I'm using a lightweight quilter's cotton. I have not interfaced it at all. That's not necessary for this pattern. Then I've chosen a leather, and the thing about the leather, cork, or vinyl that you choose, you do want to make sure that it's got a nice temper to it. As I hold this up, you can see it holds its shape. There's no stretch to it. If you choose a vinyl that's real stretchy, like a garment vinyl, when you go to cut your card slots or even line up the edges, it's going to give you a lot of trouble because it's not the best quality. So when I add my snap placement here, based on the thickness of this, I don't need any reinforcements of this. I've made this wallet before in this and it worked out great. But again, if it's a lighter weight vinyl or leather, you may want to add some reinforcement behind your snap, like a small little square of waterproof canvas or a Decoville or something, just so your snap doesn't get pulled through if it's a stretchy vinyl. I understand people have their favorites and they're going to use whatever they want despite my recommendations, so just keep that in mind when you are picking your materials. The other thing you're going to need is you're going to need a zipper. This one is metal tape, so I did cut it to 6 inches long, and then I removed 1/2 inches worth of the teeth so that it can fit nicely inside our zipper box. That's for a zipper by the yard. Otherwise, you would just use a straight 5-inch zipper because they already account for that extra tape on the edge. And then you're going to need some spring snaps. I would caution you of using line snaps, the line 20 and 24s, because those can be really strong, and they're made for thicker materials like a heavier weight leather, and you don't want to pull your snap through when you open and close it. So this spring snap is 12.5 millimeters. I find it's just strong enough to get a good closure, but also not strong enough that you're like really struggling. Today I'll be using this landscaping fabric from my card slots. I like it because it's real thin, it fan folds nicely, and it'll keep your bulk down. This is probably the only situation in any of my patterns where I'll recommend that you don't use waterproof canvas for your card slots, because we do need something to fan fold and we do need it to lay pretty well flat. So very lightweight quilt cotton or Ollie Fun, I think, is another one. Broadcloth, but just as thin as possible. You can even pink the edges if you're worrying about fraying, but when we glue this together, it's kind of a non-issue. So just to make sure you have those things, and then we'll jump right in. So I mentioned keeping your pattern pieces clipped in place. Just want to note that I did clip the zipper pocket to the wrong side so that I can trace it using my removable marking silver pen, but it can smear on the other side. So I just as soon put it on the inside where I'm not going to see it, but you can technically wipe it off. Everything else I'm just going to leave. I'm not going to really mark this with my marking pen. I'm just going to leave it clipped and use my box cutter and straight edge ruler and go straight into cutting those and hammering these holes with my punch. but you don't need these holes on the end. That's more an aesthetic thing that I like the look of. If you don't want to, you don't have to, but you do still need a way to punch this snap placement hole. So if you want to use an awl, that's fine, but I'm gonna jump right in and get that going. For the snap closure, I do instruct you not to go ahead and cut out your pattern piece yet, because we want to glue these wrong sides together and then cut it as one for the cleanest edges. If you're using the SVG files, then you don't even have to do this part. You can just have your machine cut out the pattern pieces and glue them right side together. So because I'm using leather, I bought an Eco Weld it's a water-based contact adhesive for leather. So I'm going to apply a little bit of the glue to both pieces. I like this because it is water-based, so it doesn't have a nasty, overwhelming chemical smell. It washes off easily off your fingers. I'm just using this wool dauber to apply it, and it gets tacky pretty immediate. So I'm adding to both sides. You don't need a whole lot, but make sure to get the edges so that it does form a nice seal when you join them. Whoop. And then you're gonna go ahead and lay them wrong sides together. And because I'm not great at lining up edges perfectly, SVG files would be wonderful for people like me. You're just gonna lay it down. I don't worry about the edges right now because like I said, I'm gonna trim it down to the right size and then I can even up those edges. But while this is drying, I like to go ahead and put it under something heavy. So I have this big quartz slab. I just pop it under there so that I can move on to the next step. Now I want to go ahead and add the male portion of our snap to this main piece here. So those are the two pieces that are sticking up. You have a longer post and a shorter post. The longer post is actually going to go through the back, and then the shorter one snaps on top to kind of feel a click. And then you have to actually set it with your setting tool. So I have a hand press tool with the proper dies for this, or if you don't want, or you don't have one of those, they sell these little kits off of Amazon that I started off with. Super awesome because it comes in 4 different finishes, comes with the setting tools and instructions. So if you're new to this and you want to give that a try, it's less than 15 bucks on Amazon. I highly recommend this. You will need a solid setting surface. So I have a quartz slab that you would actually set it on here because you don't want your table bouncing around in order to get a proper set on this. But I'm going to be using my press like I mentioned. So I don't know about you, but when you buy the dies for these snaps, you've got the male portion and the female portion. And I got really confused about which die sets went with what. So I kept the sets that go together with a sample of what it's setting in a bag together. Same thing here. So I already set up my machine for this, or my press, to set this style. Otherwise, I was like, what? Which one goes where? I got so confused. If you're anything like me, I suggest you organize them into little baggies like this. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and set this. And then we're gonna go ahead and finish off our strap piece. I've allowed it to glue. I've cut it down using the pattern pieces, and I got that nice smooth edge cut as one. So we're gonna sew an 1/8 inch around this and then go ahead and transfer the marking for the snap placement on here and then set the female portion as well. So when it comes to the female portion, the pretty side is the top of the snap, obviously. That's the rounded cap. So that goes through this side, and then this went through this side, and then you set it per your manufacturer instruction. So now you should have a nice snap. It shouldn't be so hard that you risk ripping. That's what we had mentioned earlier. So you just want a nice secure snap that opens and closes relatively easily. Now we're going to prep our zipper main compartment. So I'm going to add this double-sided tape to the outside of the zipper box on my leather. So we're going to do it on the wrong side. And I just put it right on the outside of this. If you are concerned about this gumming up your needle, you can use like a Dritz wash away tape. That's better for domestic machines. Otherwise, you can also use fabric tack, but I find that it dries very quickly. So you'll want to do one side, lay it down, and then do the other side. So then you're going to grab your zipper here. I already added my pull. I like to just peel off one side at a time so that when I lay it down, it doesn't automatically stick everywhere. So it allows me to just be extra precise in how I do this. So I'm going to center my teeth in the middle of this box. Move my pull out of the way, and then there are little markings. There's little stitch lines along the zipper tape, so try and find one and keep it pretty straight. So then once I like where that's positioned, then I'll peel off the other side and the top and the bottom. Okay, pull your pull out of the way, and then finding that equal stitch line on the other side, and then I'll pull this all the way up to make sure it's nice and centered. Make sure it's not wavy, because you can see a wavy zip. So just take your time to get it positioned nice and smooth. I like my zipper pull up on the top because this is where my card slots are going to be. This will be the front of the wallet, so my pull is going to the top. So now for the lining that goes on the inside, you'll notice it's cut a smidge smaller so that when we do add it to the back here, it will helpfully keep these little frays from popping out of the seam. So what I like to do for this is I like to use a standard craft glue stick and just lay it down like this so it helps me iron it and actually keeps the sides laying flat. One thing I want to draw your attention to is this, the V's at the end. Do not be overly aggressive cutting really huge V's because it'll make your box really wide, and when you go to sew the top of this zipper box, you won't catch it in your seam allowance, and it can be quite frustrating. So be very careful to transfer those V's appropriately and cut just to the very ends, and then we're going to go ahead and iron it and press it open. So now I'm going to go ahead and grab a piece of junk paper to protect my work surface, lay my liner down, and I'm going to use some spray adhesive. I'm using this Loctite brand. Just spray it lightly along the back side of your liner. You do not want to spray this because you're going to gunk up your zipper and it won't be able to open and close. I've done that before. It sucks. So I'm just going to give it a light spray. And I want to say that before you lay this down, if you have a label of some sort that you wanted to add either to your liner or your main bag, you need to add it before this step. So I went ahead and added my label. So now I'm going to grab this liner and carefully position it right over the back side of the zipper compartment. I'm going to kind of just center it. I'm paying attention to the edges, and then I'm also paying attention to the zipper box. So they should be a pretty good line up there. And then it comes just shy of this border. Again, we don't want that popping out in our final seam. So I'll flip it over and then give it a good press here so that it just kind of sticks in place. Now I'm going to take it to my machine and sew just around this zipper box. Whenever I'm sewing with leather, cork, and vinyl, I like to not backstitch, instead pull the threads to the back and then singe them off, just for a cleaner finish so you don't see like multiple stitches on the front. Personal preference, but that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start here, go all the way around, pull my threads to the back, and then singe them off. All right, so we just sewed the box. And then you can see that we did catch all the lining, which is super important because our box is only a 1/2 inch, which matched this. Let's move on to the next step. Now we're going to take the glue. Again, I'm going to use the leather Eco Weld, but you could use the fabric tack if you're using vinyl or cork. And I'm just going to add a little bit to just the edges here because we want to fold it over and secure it. Now, I'm adding it a little bit onto the fabric. This will also help ensure that when I fold it over to glue the pocket, the lining actually gets tacked down on itself in case you don't quite catch it in your sewing. So just add a little bit all around that perimeter. And we're gonna fold it over, lining up those slit edges. And like I said, this stuff gets tacky almost immediately, which is kind of nice because I don't like to wait for things to dry, but sometimes you just gotta. So I open up the zipper a little bit so that the side can lay as flat as possible. Give it a good press. Same thing here. And then I'm gonna clip this because this part wants to kind of pop up. Just add a couple of clips around it to just hold it up. You can put a heavy book on it too or something, but while this is drying, we're gonna go ahead and move on to adding the adhesives to the back of this piece. We're gonna cut 13 strips, they're little 2-inch strips, and we're gonna apply them to the back of this, and then we're gonna have 5 of them ready to go by our machine so it's easy to grab and go. I've already cut my 8 strips of double-sided tape, and I'm gonna leave the backings on, but the very first one starts up a 1/2 inch from this bottom here, so I gotta measure 1/2 inch and lay this one down. Then I'm gonna take the rest of them and put them directly below the cut slits. And I didn't get a ruler out to cut these exactly 2 1/4 inches at all. I eyeballed it. That's why they're all different lengths, but this is one of those things that it's not that important. And then I just go about a 1/2 inch, like kind of, I split the difference. Just go a 1/2 inch above, but not all the way to the top. Grabbed my landscaping fabric. This is nice because it comes on a 40-inch roll, so it's kind of the perfect length for adding 6 card slots. The thing that I want to make sure you are aware of though is you don't want to bring your lighter anywhere near this. So I do like to sew and then pull the threads to the back. Either you can use fray check or just tie them off in a really good knot, but don't use your lighter near this, it will melt. Same thing, I see a little ripple in this piece and you might feel inclined to go ahead and give it an iron to smooth it out. Again, it will melt. Don't bring heat anywhere near this. So to start, I've got my machine set up for maximum efficiency. I got a little handy ruler so that we can measure up 1/2 inch each time we go. And then over here, I've got 5 strips of double-sided tape ready to go. So to start, you're gonna grab the first bottom lower slit, peel off the backing, and then you're gonna take your landscaping fabric and press that into it going up. So the raw edge is face down, the tail is going up. We're gonna flip it over and sew the first row right below the cut slit. You're welcome to do the back stitching if you like, if that doesn't bother you. I just like the cleaner finish, so I do pull them off. It does add a bit of time because I'm pulling them to the back and tying them off. But there's no hard and fast rule that you need to follow with this part. I'm going to show you the first couple of card slots, and then we're going to jump to speeding it up so that, because it's kind of repetitive, we're doing this same thing 6 different times. I'll just trim that off. So next thing, you're going to go ahead and peel off this this bottom adhesive. And then you're going to go ahead and pull your fabric. You're going to give it a nice tug, but you don't want to pull it really hard, and then you're going to create like a bunch of gaps and looping. So just tug it enough so that you can lay it nice and smooth. This had that little ripple in there, so I want to pull it out because I can't iron it. Give it a good finger press, and then we're going to go back up. This is going to create the actual pocket for your card, and we're going to go up. So now I'm going to give it a nice finger press with my finger there, so nice crease, and finger press in here. Now before I go on to actually sewing this, I want to make sure that it looks good, because if you put your card slot in and it falls into no man's land, you know you've done something wrong. You're not, you know, beyond the point of seam ripping and starting over. So it looks good. We got a little bit of a gap. We can find our card. I'm going to keep moving. So now take the card out and then go ahead, sew a row along the bottom here. When we're done with that, we're going to flip it over, and I'm going to measure a 1/2 inch from the fold here, and add our next adhesive, and then continue the fan folding, measuring up a 1/2 inch, and then I'll show you when we get to the final card slot what we're gonna do. I just sewed below the last and final card slot, but I'm not done. I've had people say where, you know, they'll stick it into the final adhesive and they realize they don't have a pocket. So the giveaway is that I still have one lonely little tape left, and I only have 5 little folds. You need 6 folds for 6 card slots. So don't think that you're quite done yet. We have to do that one final fold. We're not doing any more stitching, but we do have to complete the fold, okay? So pull that down, and then last fold into this tape up here. Here we go. Now it's always a good practice to get into, to just make sure your card slots look good before you move along. You don't want a completed wallet and you jacked up your card slot somewhere. It's pretty soul-sucking when you realize you've done that. So far looking pretty good. Just installed our card slots. It's a nice low profile because it fan folds nice and smooth. This is what we want. Now we're going back to our glue. I'm gonna go ahead and add it to the perimeter and then up the middle. I'm not gonna really put it over here where it goes to the card slots because it's so thin. I'm afraid that it could seep through and like stick my card slots. So I am just going to just get the edges. I'm just dabbing it on. And then fold it perfectly in half, lining up those straight edges and your cut. Give this a good press here because we're going to go ahead and top stitch this, so I do want the glue to kind of catch right there. And I do love this stuff because you can already just feel it adhering pretty well. But if you're using Fabri-Tac or any other glue, you're going to want to clip it in place and give it a chance to dry before you move along to the next step. Otherwise it pops open. So next step, take it to the machine and we're going to sew an 1/8 inch along the folded edge to create the slip pocket. For the next few steps, we're going to be sewing now with layers and stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and increase my stitch length, one, because it looks nicer for your top stitch, but also it will prevent it from like dragging and really tight stitches if it's thicker fabric. So I put mine up to about a 4.5, 5, when I usually do about a 3.5. So we're going to go ahead and stitch an 1/8 inch from this edge. And this part is complete. Okay, time to put it all together. This is the exciting part. When you go to add your card slots to your zipper compartment, you want to make sure that you're not putting it on the side with your label. You want that on the other side. Or if you don't even have a label to consider, we want the zipper up top as we lay this down. So I wouldn't put it like this if I didn't have a label where it closes down here. Now, before I add my snap, I want to line these top edges as best that I can and make sure it's nice and flush, because I'm going to go ahead and trim down this part and this side after I'm done sewing because I can, but when we have the flap closure in place, you can't really trim it down. So I'm paying special attention to make sure that this is nice and even. And if I find that it is kind of uneven, now would definitely be the time you want to go ahead and trim that up before you add your card slots. So I'm not going to take much off. I just want to even it up. So now it's nice and smooth. This is also pretty smooth. So we're going to line up our corners here. Just like that. And I'm going to go ahead and clip this in place. Now you're going to take your snap closure and snap it in place. And I've got plenty of excess, so you can even trim that down. But you want to leave extra so you have a chance to tuck it in. We're not going to tuck it in between these layers. We're going to tuck it in between our main body here. So I do have to peel this open. I know we glued it, but just gently peel this back. And we don't want it in between the fabric layers. We want it in between the leather and the fabric. So I found a little gap here, and I'm going to just fold this over and tuck it right inside that hole, okay? So even when you open up your zipper pocket inside, you're not going to see a flap, and you're not going to have a flap in here that can make it difficult to get your cash in and out of. So that's important to make sure that it's in there, and then go ahead and line it up so it's nice and straight and not on a curve, and then finish clipping that in place, lining up those edges. Again, I can trim the other sides down if it's not quite perfect, so I don't worry as much as I do about that top layer. So once it's in place, you should have roughly a 1/2 inch gap along here. So I'm going to go ahead and unsnap it, keep it nice and pinched in place with my clips. And then we're going to take it to our machine, and we're going to sew anywhere from 1/8 to 1/4 inch along this side. Give yourself a little bit of wiggle room so you can trim it down. If you're using the SVG files, hopefully that's not even an issue, but I'm allowing for cutting error because we've all done it. We're not all crazy accurate unless you're going super slow. So take it to my machine, and we're going to sew across here, go down here, and end it right here. All right, and again, I want these laying as flat as possible, so I have my zipper halfway open, because when it's all the way down to the bottom or all the way to the top, it tends to make this one a pucker. So go slow over this because this is multiple layers here. Sometimes if you need a hump jumper to get up so you don't skip stitches, keep that in mind. And then I tend to go slow so I can be precise around my corners. And I'm giving myself a little leeway because I can already see it's a little uneven, so I know I'm going to trim that. So I'm going more of a 1/4 inch around this side. Same thing with this one, give myself a little wiggle room to trim. I like to hand crank around these shorter edges so I can have more control over my machine. I'm nowhere near my landscaping fabric, so I'm going to go ahead and just singe those down. So I just want to show you right now how my edges aren't the greatest. So this is where we're going to get to take our opportunity to smooth everything out. So we move my zipper out of the way, and I can see the little overhang. So I'm going to take my ruler, and you don't want it to slide and shift, but I'm going to pay attention to my my stitching there, and I'm going to move it, give myself at least 1/8 inch. Hold it really hard so it doesn't slip or slide or anything like that, and then pushing your blade, whether it's a box cutter or a rotor cutter, up tight against the ruler and push hard, and then trim them all together as one. Gives you the cleanest edges. So I'm going to continue to do it on all 3 sides, and again, we made sure to make sure that top was nice and lined up, because I can't really trim that down unless I'm going to go with scissors or kind of go around it. All right, so technically, look at how clean that is. It's beautiful. Technically, I can be done. I like to edge paint my stuff, so I'm going to do that in the next steps. But because this is a nicer leather where it's already dyed through and it's black, the edges are really nice looking. You don't really technically have to do anything with this. But a lot of vinyls and corks have a different colored backing, so you can see like white. I've seen people use Sharpies, you can do that, or a clear drying glue to seal it if it's a cork or vinyl so that it doesn't fray over time. If you're gonna go that route, I would take a lighter and just kind of singe any threads before we go ahead and do our top coat. So in order to do leather edge painting, I'm going to be using this Giardini brand, and this brand does require a base coat, so you have to buy that separate from the actual colors. Other types of edge paint don't require that, so it's your preference. I'm a big fan of this brand. I've even done another YouTube video talking about the different brands and why I choose this one. So to start, I'm going to go ahead and add the base coat. I usually do 2 layers of the base coat, sand in between, and then I only need 1 or 2 layers of the color, depending on the coverage I'm getting or what look I'm going for. So I'm just gonna, you need an application tool. This is a roller pen from Tandy. It's well loved, as you can see. So we'll add that first layer, and you do need to allow at least 20 to 30 minutes between the layers to allow adequate dry time. So this has 1 layer of the base coat on. I've given it adequate time to dry. Now I'm going to take 80 grit sandpaper, and I'm just going to file down any bubbles or any uneven areas. It's kind of harder to do it on the strap because it's a thinner strap, but just to smooth out the areas. Sometimes you have like a little thread or something that kind of caused a bubble. And then the nice thing about sanding in between is that it'll kind of file down the outside edges while leaving that channel where the leathers or vinyls join filled in. Once we got it pretty well filed, then I'm going to go ahead and add another layer of the base coat so that I only have to do 1 layer of the color. You don't want to gob the base coat on first, or your color if you're doing a different brand. You got to do a first layer is fairly light. You're covering and making sure it's getting in all the grooves and everything, but you want a lighter layer to actually soak into the material so that it has a good adhesion to it so that it doesn't peel over time. And then the next one you can actually add it a little bit thicker, and as well as your color. This one has the 2 layers. I've already filed it and I've wiped it down with a rag, and now I'm going to go ahead and add my black color.